Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AFPI's Vice Chair of Energy and Environment, Oliver McPherson-Smith.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to welcome you to the American Policy Institute's first Global Summit. Folks, I'm going to cut straight to the chase. Despite the hot air you might have heard about climate change and global warming, we in actual fact find ourselves in the midst of a worldwide winter of socialist energy policy. Around the world, governments are abusing an increasingly thin patina of environmentalism to push policies that further and further encroach on the freedoms of everyday citizens. They're using carbon border adjustments to unnecessarily stifle trade, carbon taxes that heap costs on everyday consumers. They're using electric vehicle mandates to prevent consumers from buying the vehicles that they want. And they're using corporate sustainability directives to offshore economic regulation to the backwaters of Brussels in Belgium to empower Eurocrats at the expense of democratically elected governments like our own. But folks, as we find ourselves in the midst of this darkness, the abyss of green socialism on a worldwide scale, there remains hope. For there remains the shining city upon the hill. Under the America First leadership of President Trump, our nation is once again returning to, recommitting and advancing the American model of energy and environment. It's the model that puts consumers back in the driver's seat because we know that American families know what's best for American families. Not bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C., and definitely not men in grey suits in Brussels. It's the model that fosters and facilitates competition because we know competition leads to lower prices for consumers and innovation that improves the quality of goods and services. Innovation that is ultimately the driver of wealth and prosperity. It's the model that recognizes that government should not pick winners and losers. It shouldn't even try, because we know when government tries, it ultimately picks losers. Folks, though our nation is increasingly on the right path, unfortunately, some of our friends around the world have lost that path. In just a few weeks, the global progressive elite will descend on Brazil for the annual United Nations Climate Conference, the COP as it's known. They'll jet in on their private jets, irrespective of the carbon emissions. They'll go to their cocktail hours, they'll have a couple of caipirinhas, they'll catch up with their former classmates from the Harvard Kennedy School. And at the end of the day, they will arrive at the same policy prescriptions that they always do. They'll lecture the world that the world is ending, and the only way to avert catastrophe is to give them more power at the expense of everyday citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, to the folks, the good people of Brazil, we say, vocês merecem melhor. You deserve better. The United States and our people of our nation deserve better. Everyone deserves better. That's why it's my great honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce you today to our Global Energy Summit, the Anti-COP. Folks, over this morning, we are going to discuss what it means, this American model for energy and environment. Not only the policies that have worked historically, but also how we can improve upon that model, the policies we need to drive our nation forward. And that's why it's my great honor to introduce our very first speaker, a fearless and tireless advocate for energy freedom and for human flourishing. He is the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in extending a very warm America First welcome to Representative Brett Guthrie.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for being here, and thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. And it's great to be here at this time because this is such an important time in this industry. I remember just right after I got chairmanship, I went to the Permian Basin Center with August Pfluger, and we were looking at everything pumping and going and moving. He goes, this is world power right here. This is world power. And I was born in 1964, so I'm a child of the 1970s, so I remember pushing my dad's Pinto, and he would drive the Pinto, get in line, and then we'd push it until we got close to the gas pump and then go get him because he'd want to sit in line. So I remember gas shortages. And I remember moving my daughter into college in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, and my wife and they went to get some stuff from the dorm room. I'm sitting and she was in Chicago, we're in Kentucky, and Iran had bombed a Saudi Arabia refinery. This is probably 2018, 2019, a Saudi Arabia refinery. You probably remember the time. And I remember calling my wife. I said, before you get back to the dorm, make sure you fill the car up till it tops off, like where gas is running down the side, because that's about how we could get home if we did that. I know we could get home on one tank if that was the case. And I kept looking and looking and watching. You know, the price of oil, the gas went up about a dime. And then when I was a kid, there would have been gas lines. And I remember driving home thinking, this is energy independence. This is energy independence. When you have energy independence, now I'm not going to dismiss what's going on in the Mideast is important to us as a nation, but it doesn't affect our economy if we're truly energy independent. And so what I want to talk about for just a couple of minutes is what we're going to do on energy and commerce. And I really hope we can do something that's bipartisan. Because when you're investing in infrastructure, some of it, and if it's electricity industry, 30-year assets, then you need some stability. Things that if they change every 2 to 4 years, it makes it difficult for you to invest, and we need energy. So we started the session this year with one of the hearings, our big hearing, with Eric Schmidt from Google, who came and spoke on his book, the book Genesis, about competing with China and how we have to compete with China with AI. And when the AI folks come to see you and they talk to you, they say, well, we have the brain power. We're the smartest people in the world. We know that. We have the money. We have the capital. There's just capital waiting to be deployed. What's holding it back is the regulatory side. We have to get the right regulatory side. But more importantly than anything, access to energy. Energy is everything in AI. It's everything in our economy. It's how we drive and how we move. And so what we've done so far, we were able, when we could do it in a partisan way, we were able to remove the EV mandates. We're able to undo the California mandates. We've done a lot of things to make sure that we get our energy trail back. Because think of what happened in the IRA. I can take you to Glendale, Kentucky. There's 2 big Ford battery plants. Only one's going to be occupied. The other's sitting still. About $9 billion investment because the government was going to mandate people buy cars. So industry invested their money. People didn't want to buy the cars. And guess what? The money's sitting there. They never would have put that money in place if the government hadn't had that kind of mandate. So we want the free and open market. So how do we make it bipartisan? We're working it. I can tell you, trying to work it. And the one thing that kind of touches on this, there was a $42 billion appropriation in the Inflation Reduction Act to deploy broadband. Not a single Republican voted for it, but it's $42 billion to deploy broadband. 3.5 years later, when President Trump came into office, guess how much money was still in the account? $42 billion. Not a penny had been spent. So the Democrats see, and you see their new word on the progressive left is abundance. So maybe there's an opportunity, we're hoping, for us to come together to do a bipartisan permitting reform so that we can move electrons. And I tell my friends on the other side, if there was no polar ice caps as of 2017 like Al Gore predicted, if the Earth didn't exist as of 2024 like Greta Thunberg predicted, then I'd probably have a different attitude. But every time they give these colossal predictions and we go past them, it just makes them less and less and less credible. Well, we can look to a society who follows that. We can look to Europe. We know what not to do. So China's looking to produce. Europe's looking to reduce. We're not competing with Europe to regulate. We're competing with China to innovate. And so we have to change our focus. And the one thing, if I walked up to most of my Democrat colleagues and say, hey, it's time we do permitting reform, we need to unleash American energy, they would just laugh. But if we can bring it around a common theme that we want to beat China, and I bring in big Democrat donors to our committee who are in the AI space, the technology space, and that space to say, hey, I know we've been, they don't bring up the money, I'm not going to say that, but they know when they sit there and they're saying, hey, we're on your team, we're on your side, but we're not going to be able to run our businesses if we don't change our policy in America. That's what we've been focusing on, and that's what we're going to work hard to do. And I'm really pleased to be here. I know that you're about to see Ambassador Sands and Harold Hamm to warm up for them. It would be kind of like warming up for Elvis in the energy world. So I get the great privilege of doing. I did see Elvis when I was 11 in Huntsville, Alabama. So it's a great privilege to be here. To be serious, that energy independence matters. If you look at where we are as a society, we live so much better than anybody else in the world compared to anywhere else in the world. And if you look at where we've gone from the Civil War till today, and I would like to say, and I do believe a big part of it is, the Civil War is when we finally gave all these truths self-evident that all people are created equal. The Civil War kind of brought that promise to fruition in this country, and that is a big part of it, freedom and opportunity. But that's when the oil boom started. That's when John D. Rockefeller went from producing produce to producing energy and oil. So cheap energy. We live the way we live because of a lot of things. But the most important ingredient to the standard of living we have today, in my view, is cheap energy. And I've been given the opportunity by my colleagues to chair this committee. And if my legacy or our legacy in this Congress is how we continue Americans to progress, we have to continue to have the fight because we have cheap. The issue that frustrates me more than anything is that we have it in abundance, to use their word. It's just so we're going to have the systems in place so we can produce it, we can move it, and we can use it. And that's our task. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you again, Representative Guthrie, for those excellent remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel for the day. The panel is entitled Innovation in the American Energy Industry, Past, Present, and Future, featuring our two participants, Ambassador Carla Sands, the chair of the America First Policy Institute's Foreign Policy Initiative, and Mr. Harold Hamm, the executive chairman of Continental Resources and one of America's most fearless energy entrepreneurs. Would you please join me in welcoming Ambassador Sands, Mr. Hamm.
Thank you, David. I just want to, first of all, welcome the legend, Harold Hamm, joining us today. And will you put your book up so everyone can see it? All right. This is his book, Game Changer. Harold just met with the president recently, and he's been talking to him about filling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the SPR. And so I'd love Harold to tell us a little bit about what he can share about his advice to President Trump and his administration. Harold?
Well, thank you. President Trump is always interesting to talk about. So, we've had a very good relationship for a long time, a very long time, and with the president, and I think it's been valuable. He does call on me from time to time to talk about oil and gas and energy and what we should do or shouldn't do. And so I've been able to advise him somewhat, and sometimes he does, follows that advice. But, first of all, he's, as we all know, he's so intelligent. He understands real quick what you're talking about. And, something that's really very diverse, like our industry. He gets it, and he gets it real quick. And so I've been able to visit with him and about the needs. And recently talked to him about how China is taking advantage of the cheap oil and building their stockpile of reserves over there in that country, and we should be doing the same. And immediately, I no more than walked out of the office, and he announced, that we should refill SPR. And so it's going to be fun to watch. So hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely, at a low price. We saw what President Biden did, how he emptied so much of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and how that endangers our national security.
Yeah, this president, doing something that you ought to do fundamentally, and that's buy cheap and sell high. Of course, we saw Biden just do it for political reasons, and that's all. That's his whole intent. But this president understands, the reason we have SPR there. That reserve is so important. So he's done it for all the right reasons, and he's doing it while we have some surplus in the world. And even though that surplus is very small, less than 2% over capacity that you could produce today, it's getting very small. But it's a time to do it because it's not going to last. That oversupply is not going to last forever. Within a couple of years, it's gone.
Right. Now, you've seen policy, state policy, federal policy up close for decades. Sometimes policy has slowed down energy production. Sometimes it's maybe been helpful. How do you see our energy policy today, and how can we fix the problems that we have?
Well, we fixed a bunch of them. We fixed a bunch of them, last November. With the prior administration, we're all aware of that. Basically, they want to put us out of business. Wasn't going to be any more oil and gas. Didn't need us any longer. So that was their belief, and certainly was wrong. But anyway, with Trump administration, it's totally different. We've seen so many changes, regulatory, all across the board. EPA, my goodness, what a difference Lee Zeldin has made. What a difference Chris Wright has made. What a difference Doug Burgum has made. All these wonderful, wonderful folks that's capable now in the administration, the Trump administration, and all the changes that's come down the pike since that has happened. We're not done. We've just gotten started, but it is so different. I just heard the comments on permitting. It's a changed world all of a sudden. You can get permits in Converse County, Wyoming, for the first time. So it's a different ballgame. Is there issues out there yet that remain? Absolutely. And we got to be changing those on a daily basis. Some of them just make common sense. And, like refilling the SPR today and all those things. So a lot of challenges yet, but, making sure that we get on top of it and change those as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. I look at President Trump as a common sense president. He sees this opportunity, and it's the right thing to do on behalf of the American people and our security.
Yeah, that's right. Behalf of the American people and national security is a huge issue. One thing that's been talked about is every state has its own responsibility to provide national security. But are we seeing that? No, we see several states like California. Mm-hmm. They're not carrying their load. New York, Illinois, just willy-nilly shut down the industry. I mean, are they doing their part for national security and energy independence? No. So those things can be changed and really with the stroke of a pen.
Well, that's one of the reasons why AFPI has started state chapters. And we have, I think it's about 10 chapters now across the country. And Brooke Rollins, our founder, has plans that we will have state chapters in every U.S. state within several years. And because the states control so much policy, as you were just talking about, like New York and California, and their very, I would say, regressive energy policy that's causing prices to go up in their states. How do you see the new frontier for energy here in the U.S. if you're looking at LNG and the fracking, the advanced nuclear, the geothermal? What do you see looking forward, Harold?
Okay, I'm going to first talk just a dab about AFPI. Isn't it wonderful that this administration is populated by so many of the AFPI leaders? How good is that? Amen. Thank you for what you're doing, Carla. Thank AFPI for what they've done, the leadership that they've shown in America with this organization and in preparation of leadership. And today we've got an administration that is actually leading, making all these changes that's necessary to get America back on track, make America great again. So it's just fabulous what you're doing. And yeah, the state chapters, however far you want to take it, that's a great thing. I'm glad you're doing it. So I appreciate the leadership, and I know everybody in this room and everybody in oil and gas everywhere. I appreciate what you've done, the leadership you've taken. But it's a tremendous thing that AFPI has done and continues to do and will do in the future.
Absolutely, with our great leaders in so many different policy areas. But Harold, I want to know, like, if you could wave a magic wand and change some rules, what are one or two of the things you would do right now that you could advise the administration to do to unlock the potential for American energy growth, to bring down the cost of energy? And I'm not talking about the spot price. I'm talking about in general, the other sources.
There's several things. The permitting issue is a big one. Pipelines, right of eminent domain needs to be federal. It needs to be a federal mandate that couldn't be shut down by states and local counties and whatever. So that's another one. But there's several of those things out there to do. Having an environmental impact study on everything that you do, that needs to be changed. It has to be changed. So will we get to that, and can we do that over the next 3 years? Absolutely we can. So we just have to get with the program and get it done. And those things take time. But I believe you ask about the industry, where we're at and what's going on. Well, we know we've got an oversupply that's forced the price of oil down. Anytime you can produce in the world one extra barrel, it has a bearing on price. And we know that. So we're forced down to some pretty low prices, with the Saudis and OPEC producing wide open. And they are doing it all for market share. We've seen this before, right? It's not going to last very long, folks. You're looking at about 2-year window here that suddenly will change. And once you peak out and it starts over the hill, guess what? It's going to be a little tough to get it turned around next time. Let me tell you, we've had a great impact on energy. Chris Wright tells it better than anybody. He said that horizontal drilling did one thing. It gave cheap energy to the entire world, and it did. But let me tell you, that's a one-time event. One-time event. What's the next technology going to look like? It's not going to be near that impactful, I can tell you for sure. Horizontal drilling changed the world, but it's up to us to try to find the next one, but it's not going to be easy. We're drilling our best stuff first today, every day. And so, those reserves are gone. But, I'm not here to talk gloom and doom and all that kind of stuff. You mentioned data centers and new technology, AI. Sure, we can take advantage of some of that too, oil and gas. But also, the data centers have, their fuel of choice, what's going to drive them is natural gas. That's the best thing. So we're a little bit early on that curve. They're building them. When they get them running, folks, they're going to be a hell of a draw on gas. And so, that's going to be a big bright spot. 2 years from now, you let us get by the supply-demand, where it crosses over, guess what happens out there? You get a little short on oil. Kind of looks like a hockey stick, doesn't it? We're going to have to be real vigilant, or we're going to see prices spiral and maybe get out of control. Well, we won't think it's out of control, but it's going to be higher.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of prices, when you look at the price of oil, where do you see like the healthy price of oil for business investment? How do you look at volatility? And kind of talk to us about that.
Well, it's easy to see. I mean, it's very evident what's going on right now. You see these low prices. What do you see with the rig count? Just going down. So we're in that downward trend. So, I've said it early, a year or two ago. I'll say it now. You need about $80 a barrel to have an industry that runs, that works. And that's what you have to have. So we've been seeing it dwindle down all this year and getting into a situation that, is get pretty desperate after a while. So you need about $80 to have a healthy industry.
Harold, you helped to pioneer fracking, horizontal drilling in the Bakken. What can you tell us about that innovation, and what do you see coming down the pike? Do you see any new innovation looking forward in the near future?
Well, I've seen a lot of innovation. Certainly, back when a few of us was doing the horizontal drilling, absolutely, that was innovative. Some people thought it was crazy, and there wasn't a whole lot of followers. The first ever horizontal oil field was Cedar Hills in North Dakota, and Boone Pickens made the statement one time. He said, we can get natural gas, out of this shale. We all know we can do that, but won't see the ability to get oil out of shale during our lifetimes. And Boone's gone now, but he was. It took a long time. It was a hard hill to climb, and so that's been very innovative. What will be next? Well, we've seen what's gone on with LNG. That's been a great innovation, and able to supply our allies and actually save them from very cold winter a couple winters ago when Russia cut off their supplies. So that's been very innovative. What will be the next one? We're leaving a lot of oil in the ground. I think EOR is certainly going to be one of those, and that we're going to have to innovate in some very thoughtful ways, and we can do it. We've of course worked with enhanced oil recovery, for a lot of years, but we're going to have to step it up and do it in some highly measurable ways in the future. So, is there other things to do to innovate for energy? Certainly there is. Nuclear and a few of these things is going to be 10 years off, folks. It's over the hill yet. So it's going to be oil and gas, and the world is going to be dependent upon us. And we can do it. We can supply it.
Thank you, Harold. So I read your great book, Game Changer. And in Harold's book, he talks about how entrepreneurship, not central planning, is what made American energy great. Now, Harold, if you were going to talk to a 25-year-old that wants to go into the energy field, what advice would you give them today?
Well, I do. I talk to a lot of 25-year-olds and younger, and there's a lot of opportunity, and you have to learn to look for that opportunity. That's what being an entrepreneur is: seeing opportunity, moving on it, and making something of it. So there was a lot of people that mentored me. So I try to give back, and I talk to a lot of young people, in colleges everywhere, and they're eager to listen and learn, and know what they should be doing. That's what turned me on to oil and gas. I was a junior in high school, and I heard a very famous man, John Franks, talk about what it meant to have a passion for something, and that you can that you're good at. He was a good artist, That's what he was good at. That's what he liked to do. And he said, find that, and you'll never work a day in your life. So, that to me is oil and gas. It's not for everybody. But, these young people need to find those things. Today, there's a lot of opportunity. There's opportunity everywhere. But you have to train them to look for it. That's being an entrepreneur.
And how can we recruit and train the next generation of energy workers? This is a big deal. Mike Rowe talks about it a lot, and we need those skilled laborers. We need, the scientific know-how. How can we meet the demand that's coming?
Well, the first thing is changing the narrative of our industry, being proud to be an American energy worker and be proud of being in this industry. We've done wonderful things for the world. Stand up, be proud. That's the first thing. Change the narrative. My goodness, they put us down. They put the F word at what we do. It did everything they could. Lower us down to dirt. They didn't quite do it, folks. We've come back. We need to, show that pride that we have in our industry. I'm proud of what we've done, and I think we all are here. And we need to show that pride, and let everybody know that what we're doing is good for the world, and it certainly is. Thank you.
It certainly is, Harold. And in fact, I would see commercials sometimes over the years from some of the majors, and they'd be apologizing for producing energy and talk about how they're going green. But as a matter of fact, our American energy is cleaner than anywhere in the world, and we are powering the world. And if you think about our adversaries and how they're trying to use energy as a weapon against us, this is really important that people like Harold and all of you in this room are successful and that we power America and defeat our adversaries using our American energy. Harold, as we wrap this up, there are so many things we could talk about with this wonderful group. Are there any last words you want to leave our audience with regarding energy, looking forward, Harold, and looking to American energy security?
This industry always has required a large sense of faith and looking forward. I've always had that. And sometimes prices get low and things look bad, and, know that it won't be very long, things will change and improve. And it happens, and we go through these cycles. And I think most people in this room has been through several cycles, perhaps. It'll get better, Byron. It does. Yeah. Sometimes they're hard to live through a down cycle, but it will get better, and you just have to know that and have faith that this industry will prevail. Everything depends on energy. Everything. Knowledge. Energy is knowledge. Think about that. That's what we're doing with AI. We're driving AI today and will. And it takes energy to do it, and a tremendous amount of it. It'll change the entire world. I look forward to it. I think we're going to see cures for disease we never thought possible. With AI, we got to win that race. We are winning. We're winning it. America looked good to me. And I think we have wonderful leadership. Trump is doing a great job. We got to get, I think government will come back to work and finally carry on. So have to have a little faith in that too.
Thank you so much. Can we give Harold Hamm, an American legend, a big thank you for being with us today? Thank you, Harold.
Thank you again to Ambassador Sands and Mr. Hamm. As we all very well know, Energy permeates every sector of the economy, and the fight to keep energy affordable, abundant, and to ensure that we're prosperous is no small task, and so we're thankful for their work and your work as well in ensuring that that mission and charter is held and is kept together. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure for our next panel to introduce our next panel entitled The American Model for Energy and Environment. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, and so I'm looking forward to welcoming back to the stage Dr. Oliver McPherson-Smith, joined by our two other incredible panelists, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins and Secretary of the Department of Energy Chris Wright. Would you please join me in giving them a warm welcome?
Good morning. Chris and I were just arguing who's more to the right of the other, but who's going to sit on the far right and who's going to sit more towards the left. So, yeah, he won, obviously.
They told me I was on the far left, so I thought, thanks a lot, but it depends on the perspective. As I sit right here, we got Ollie on the far left, and Brooke is sort of a centrist.
Oh, amazing.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary Wright, Secretary Rollins. No easy questions. We're going to jump straight in. Start with Secretary Wright. How would you define the American model for energy and environment?
So I would say a dramatic change from where we were. And some contrasts are just pretty black and white. You know, we had 4 years of an administration whose basic goal was less energy. Energy was bad. Energy was a bad trade-off. We want to squelch it as much as possible. And we're going to invest a huge amount of money in energy sources that United Kingdom and Germany have spent, $1 trillion and crushed their energy systems. So our policy is pretty simple. We want more energy. We want lower cost energy, higher volumes of energy, more jobs, more opportunities with energy. And of course, like all Americans, particularly in the modern world, we want clean air, clean water, wilderness, outdoor space. We're a people of outdoorsmen. And of course, those go together. There's a very false belief that somehow if you have energy and development, you destroy your environment. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. And when I was a kid, our beautiful Rocky Mountains, 1 in 4 days, I couldn't see the mountains. They called it the brown cloud. And then they said it was because of population growth and economic growth. The population of the Denver area is 4 times greater today. The wealth is more than doubled, and the air is dramatically cleaner. I go out into the Colorado mountains as a kid. My brother and I were always outdoor adventurers. I never saw moose. I never saw bears. Now they're all over the place. So, of course, energy and environment can go together. We're for more energy, more economic opportunity, more strength for the United States, and for an awesome environment. It's crazy that that's a controversial stance.
Same question to you, Brooke. You have such a unique perspective at USDA. Really, it's the heartland of the country.
Yeah.
What does that model look like for you from your perspective?
Well, I'm going to take typical, right? I'll answer that question in just a second. But first, I want to take just a moment and think back to where we were as a country on this issue 1 year Trump, 4 years Biden, 4 years Trump, 10 years ago. If you all remember, we were moving into the Paris Climate Accord. Every country in the world, including our leaders here in our country, said that it was an absolute must or the world would melt down. Our think tank in Texas, I see some great Texans here who funded and supported us. Congressman Chip Roy was then running our 10th Amendment Center at TPPF before he ran for Congress. I was, of course, running TPPF and in contact with Chris and Harold and so many others of you that are in here today. And we began to mount the opposition to what we believed was so backwards and so devastating and so detrimental and ultimately would only serve to make the world less clean and less energy efficient and more poor, more poverty. But we were a little bit of Lone Rangers back then, Chris. I don't know if you remember. You were doing your videos as the CEO of Liberty Energy. Love it. And Chip and I, and it's still out there on the internet. You can go find it. Chip and I did a little video together, and that was kind of at the beginning of when we were trying to do more than just write papers as a movement. How do we connect with people? And I'll never forget Chip and I sitting there, and even one step further, during that time, President Trump wins unexpectedly. We don't have a President Clinton, Hillary Clinton again. But even then, if you all remember, most, not all, but most of President Trump's then leadership was advising him to stay in the Paris Climate Agreement because it would only be the U.S. and Syria, I think. Syria was the only country, I think, at that point that didn't. You can correct me, Chris, if I'm wrong on that. And so for the U.S. to be only, oh my goodness, this would be the end of the world, President Trump. You don't want, your tenure to be marked by this. And this was before I joined him in the first term, but we were working so hard. I think this, and ultimately we all know the rest of the story, right? The president, against a lot of his own advisors, his very top advisors, decided that in fact he was going to step away. But this is the importance of conversations like this today, of organizations like America First and Texas Public Policy and others, that we really are at the front lines of not just playing offense, and we're able to play offense now, which is amazing, but mounting the defense to allow us to move these issues forward. So I hope it's not lost on anyone where we were as a country on these issues 8, 9, 10 years ago. And those of you who stood alongside us and have been fighting this good fight and are entering this sort of golden age for energy. I mean, Chris Wright is the Secretary of Energy, everyone. I mean, round of applause, right? This is amazing. Amazing. And to answer Oliver's question very quickly, by God's sometimes very comedic plan, I somehow, even though it was never on my radar, end up becoming the Secretary of Agriculture. It is my greatest honor. I'm so grateful. Thank you. These are not easy issues, but they are important issues. And who knew a year ago when we were all working for the win, building for the time to perhaps lead and govern again, which so many of you were a part of, who knew that I would be in 1 hour in the Oval Office with the president talking about how to rebuild our beef herd in America. I didn't have this on my bingo card, but it is the greatest blessing. And our cabinet is a big family. We just love each other, and it's been a remarkable gift, more than anything I could ever use words to describe. But it all started with this sort of work in our organization. Listen, what I didn't realize, and the point of that, what I didn't realize when I was called about this job was what a role that USDA and the Secretary of Agriculture would play in an energy dominance agenda. It's a very unique position for me as a Texan. My husband runs a significant oil and gas business in Texas. We had at TPPF been talking fossil fuels and the moral case for fossil fuels. The Sparks family over here to my right, who funded that work by Kathleen Hartnett-White, who just passed away about a year ago, but she was just a champion for this before it was even really in the narrative. And but now understanding the incredible opportunity at every level for not just the fossil fuel piece of this, but all of the above, timber, biofuels, ethanol, and what that means to farmers and to our national security as a country is just something I would have never even begun to understand until taking this job, but now advocating on behalf of those important issues has really become an important part of our portfolio. The final thing I'll say is this. While so much of the world, back to the Paris Climate Agreement, so much of the world is hyper-focused on this net zero craziness. What that is good for is for our farmers in America, because we become one of the top exporters of ethanol to the rest of the world, where those sorts of energy sources, they can't reach those goals without American farmers. So that's a really important piece of this for me. But the overall agenda and the leadership of Secretary Wright, Secretary Burgum, but President Trump in ensuring that we are an energy dominant country, that we continue to lead the world. None of that is possible without the agenda that Chris is leading, and that Oliver, you and Carla and the whole team at AFPI continue to support. So thank you.
You're too kind. No, I want to pick up on this point, Brooke, about the diverse sources of energy that we have in America. Often when people hear America First energy policies, they think it's only oil and gas. Now, oil and gas is the backbone of the American energy ecosystem, the industry, that much is clear. But through the president's policies, his executive orders, through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, whether it's the tax code or whatever it may be, the president is helping diversify that source of energy and facilitating those very advanced sources. I would love to hear your perspective, whether it be advanced nuclear, critical minerals, geothermal. Give us some perspective there on the future of American energy.
You bet, Oliver. And so first of all, yeah, people say that to me all the time. Well, you're only for oil and gas. And it turns out the percent of my time that I spend on oil and gas is quite small, right? Oil and gas is 72% of total primary energy in the United States. Record high market share ever. Although when I talk to my colleague in the United Kingdom, they are still passionately pursuing the net zero plan and the politics around it. I had to politely remind them they've actually got us there. 75% of total primary energy in the United Kingdom comes from two sources, oil and natural gas. They never say that out loud, but that's the math, right? If you make your electricity really expensive, guess what happens? You produce less of it. It becomes a shrinking part of your energy stack. It's very hard to run a modern world without hydrocarbons. In fact, we just don't know how to do it. But I'm a believer in markets and freedom. And I look out at this room and I see Team Freedom. And Team Freedom is on the ascendant. We've had rough years, but I think it's on the ascendant. But we do have exciting energy sources. Nuclear is one. Nuclear was 6.5% of global energy in the year 2000. It's less than 5% today, but it's dispatchable, it's reliable, it works 24/7, whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. And the government killed it for 4 decades with smothering regulation and fear-mongering. So this administration, we are leaning a lot in to try to restart the American nuclear industry. The world is wanting to go and embrace nuclear power at many countries around the world. And guess who's building their reactors? The Russians or the Chinese? The last 22 reactors built around the world were built by those two countries. Do we want them leading in a new energy technology? That's totally nuts. And I think we are going to change that. In fact, that's the phone call I was on just as I walked in here. We're going to make America the leader in nuclear technology again. Oliver, you mentioned next generation geothermal. We figured out you can use shale technology to mine the heat from underground. There's a 400 megawatt plant in Utah under construction right now, which is drilling and fracking wells, something America knows how to do quite well. So there's exciting and fusion energy. I went to college over 40 years ago to work on fusion energy, the power of the sun. Turns out harnessing that power of the sun on Earth is difficult. We didn't figure it out right away, but it's close. And I think you're going to see exciting progress. And truly the pathways to commercial fusion will be visible in this administration and because of this administration. Because they're leaning into science, leaning into progress, getting the politics and the nonsense out of our national labs and out of our research funding, and focusing on merit and what technologies will actually benefit our energy system and benefit the United States. So when Brooke gets confused on stage, which country's first, I got my socks there to remind her who's first. Now, and again, I got to thank everyone in this room. Your belief, whether you were in fashion or out of fashion, your steadfast commitment to these ideas of freedom and America first, you're why we won. You're why we're here and why we're getting to reverse it. And I got to say one thing. Sorry, Oliver, going too long. Brooke mentioned the Paris Climate Accord and where we were then, right? And what happened with the Paris Climate Accord. Let me give you a microcosm from last week. This is the world we're in today. So we were going to have the first ever global carbon tax. International Maritime Organization, IMO, had a net zero shipping fuels initiative that was to be voted on in London last week. And it was foregone conclusion. It had been pre-agreed in April that this was happening. Well, in April, we were kind of worried about other issues. But we got informed about this issue and decided to lean in. And I remember I talked to one of the energy ministers from a big ally country of ours, might even speak the same language as us. And as I spoke to this great gal, she said, well, we know it's a foregone conclusion. It's going to pass anyway. We want to be in the tent because that'll be better than out of the tent. I'm like, I wouldn't assume that's going to pass. And so I called about 20 different countries. I listed our Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce that reached out to a lot of countries. Being a little slow, it took me till we were about 48 hours before the vote to realize, oh my God, we have the world's most influential megaphone by far. And I wrote a truth for the boss. And he edited 3 or 4 words on it, and he stuck a truth up. And I will tell you that the it's going to happen crowd were very disappointed last week when the global carbon tax, the net zero shipping fuels went down in flames last week. That's because of your support, your belief, your commitment to this stuff in fashion or out of fashion, and helping to elect President Trump and the cabinet he picked. But just a massive victory, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. That nonsense that seemed to have all the tailwinds, it was all going to happen for sure just because the tailwinds are there? Of course not. Of course not. The difference we've been in the minority, but we're right. And it's easier to win an argument when you're right than when you're wrong. They have more people, they have more momentum, but they don't have math and facts and humans on their side. We do, and we're going to win. And last year's IMO is a pivot point in this whole climate nonsense. We're going to come back to the realistic views on energy, and President Trump is just all in on American energy dominance. That's a win not just for America, that's a win for the world.
One quick little footnote on that. They had Chris calling all of the key countries in the world. I was calling Antigua and Jamaica. Those were literally, the White House.
Did you bring home the votes,
Yes,
though?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. The White House called and they said, well, we need, they're asking the cabinet that's involved in, even remotely, we're all hands on deck. This is why we're living in a moment in history that will be written about, remembered, and talked about for 500, maybe 1,000 more years. There is no doubt in my mind, and we are all part of that moment. But that is what makes this White House so different than perhaps any before it. Just that one example. Oh, well, it's foregone. The rest of the world's voting for it. Everyone else is ridiculous on this net carbon whatever neutrality craziness, and our president says, no, this is not good for Americans. This is not good for our people. This is a really stupid idea. Deploy the troops and let's beat it. And sure enough, again, Chris gets the list of 20, all the big guys. I'm like, Brooke, we need you to call Antigua and Jamaica. I'm like, all right, I can call Antigua and Jamaica. But it's a really incredible example.
Yeah. Well, let's please stick with the international topics here. Chris, are you going to COP30? What are the administration's policies concerning COP30 in Brazil in a couple of weeks? And Brooke, please tell us more about how you're implementing the president's agenda on the international stage. I think often when people hear USDA, they think of the heartland, rightly so. But I see you out and about fighting the good fight for the president's trade agenda, creating opportunities for American farmers. Tell us more about what you've been doing.
Yeah, again, one of the many things I didn't realize when I got the call for this job, and frankly, now, of course, it makes perfect sense, so it's probably me just being very thick on some things, but I didn't realize what a significant role the USDA and the Secretary of Agriculture could and should have on the international stage, making sure that our farmers and our ag products have the markets. When the president talks about realigning trade and realigning the entire world economy around American goods, it is remarkable to watch and be a part of that. And I'm sure, Chris, you've seen it too. He is literally making the phone calls himself to close the deals with all of these countries. And just to sort of underline what a remarkable turn of events this is, under the 4 years of Joe Biden, there was not one new trade deal. Not one. In the last 10 months under Donald Trump, I think we're in the several dozen at this point, but some of the big ones no one thought was possible. We, as a country, had been negotiating with the European Union for, I think, almost 30 years and couldn't break through. Same with England, with Great Britain, couldn't break through. Japan was a massive deal, couldn't break through. But the negotiators, and we have an amazing team, Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, Howard Lutnick, our Commerce Secretary, and Jamison Greer, our Trade Ambassador, all three cabinet members, and they are hand in glove with the president. So I think we've got a much more sophisticated business approach to trade than probably an American cabinet ever has in the history of the country. But then at the end of it, they'll get to the very end and can't get the deal done. And I heard a story about the UK, which was the first big deal that was struck earlier in the summer. And the story is that they got almost to the end and just couldn't get there. And the president said, well, get Keir Starmer on the phone, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And they said, oh, well, sir, it's Sunday, 3 o'clock. And, of course, President Trump's like, I don't care what day it is. Get the Prime Minister on the phone. And so they found him, and he was watching their watching football with his family. And they said, oh, sir, the President of the United States wants to talk to you. And the Prime Minister said, oh, okay. And so they bring the phone to the Prime Minister. And long story short, the President basically closed that deal and made some unbelievable, prior to be thought, absolutely impossible agreements for our farmers from America, and then some other things outside of my lane, steel, et cetera. It was amazing. So my role is not only to help guide and make sure that, when we're striking these trade deals, obviously auto, steel, there's probably some energy in there too, but the ag products are the very top of that list. And for those of you who have some ag or are watching this or probably have heard me speak, because I hear all the time, no ag secretary has been more on TV than you have, and it is true, but I'm trying to send messages to the farmers in the ag community. We've got your back, bear with us. But the opportunity and the prosperity we're moving toward for our rural communities is unprecedented. But right now, the economy is in a tough spot because of a lot of what we inherited from Biden. So the international stage, for me, has been one of the great unexpected blessings of this job, to be able to go into these countries either during or after the deals are struck and actually make the deals. So, the UK agreed to buy a whole bunch of our ethanol, as I mentioned, to their net zero goal. Well, then I went over and sat, and I don't think a Secretary of Ag has ever done this before, but we're trying to move deals here. So I went over and sat with the head of British Petroleum, the head of Shell, and the head of several other big companies in the UK who buy ethanol, so that we could move this out more quickly and get our industries into a better place as soon as possible. So it's been really cool. And the other thing I'll say is this term is so different from term one. And I'm one of the few that kind of has done both, first in term one in the senior staff in the West Wing, and now in the cabinet. And just the world stage and the respect that President Trump has, and the doors that are opened this time, and everyone wants to be our partner and our friend. It's so incredible to see when you stick to your conviction, and when you fight for freedom, and when liberty is at the top of your list and God is on your side, we will win.
So I won't be at COP 30 this year. I think there's a reasonable chance I will be at COP 31, because we want to bring our arguments to our opponents, to people that have pushed this nonsense. Everyone has thought they're untouchable. Yeah, we're for climate change too, but a little more market-driven, or we've deferred this issue. We've played on a field where the left has won. This has been their platform to grow government, to take over more industries. And we've let that happen, to my great frustration, over the last bunch of years. But I can tell you absolutely no more. If you saw the president speak at the United Nations General Assembly in his very blunt, very clear, you can't misunderstood him fashion, he said things nobody would ever say before outside, Climate change is a hoax. This is nonsense. Energy is what matters for people and prosperity and lives. And I'll tell you, I sat next to one of the I was in the U.S. delegation, but we're next to an African delegation. They loved it. They loved it. And they were laughing that this guy is bold. He's calling it like it is. He's making everyone else scream in the room. That week, they also called Climate Week. I did a New York Times panel event. I did a Reuters event. I spoke at all different events, business roundtable things, to bring just common sense about energy and climate change. And, the Department of Energy, I encourage you to read it if you've got time. We published a 140-page report on climate change, just summarizing what do we actually know? What is the data? Like, it's a real phenomenon. We've grown greenhouse CO2 concentration by 50%. It's just if you look at all the data, it's kind of just not that big of a deal. It's real, it's an issue, but it's just not remotely close to a top 5 or top 10 issue in the world. But we've treated it as like this existential threat to the planet. Nothing in the data says as much, but no one calls that out. So this president and our administration have done that, and I'll tell you, the impacts of it are dramatic. I mean, major nations that are allies of us will say, when I say these things in public or whatever, they'll say, on the side, we agree, but we can't say that out loud in our country yet. But we agree with you. We understand. They came and joined with us on the IMO voting. Bloomberg Green, I read their daily thing every day. What's going on in the green world? And they lamented right at the end as I was leaving New York City after 3 grueling days for Climate Week, which I loved, by the way. But boy, we mix it up. And the people, if you shoot down the alarmist narrative, they've got nothing. They don't have any data or facts to say you're wrong. They're just shocked that somebody would say that. Most of them don't know hardly anything about climate change. They're just used to saying it as the bogeyman, and everyone shuts up and cowers. We have to do something. But so they are a little confused by what's going on right now. But I'll tell you, we have such winning cards here. Bloomberg Green, I read as I was leaving that morning, said, wow, climate change has been displaced as the primary issue in energy. Everyone's talking about energy security, energy affordability, energy access. Like, of course, why would they ever talk about anything but that? But I think they're realizing, like, they're not this justification for big government and their replacement for religion. It isn't unchallenged anymore, and it doesn't stand up under challenge. The United National Academies of Science, Engineering, whatever the third piece is, used to be revered scientific organization in the country. Just so many of our institutions have just been corrupted by nonsense. So they published a report in response to our climate change report, which was full of data and facts. Theirs was a lot of puffing, and the science is settled, and there's no dispute, and we're sure. They never said about what we're sure, about what was settled. No data, no facts. It does not engage with our report at all. It's just sort of an embarrassing foot stomping. The only quantitative thing it engaged with in the report we published was we said from the year 1900 to 2024, 124 years, there had been 8 inches of sea level rise over that period, and the National Academy slapped us down and said it was 7 inches. That was the only quantitative disagreement in their report versus our report. I'm on CNN, well, how do you feel about the consensus scientists disagreeing? And, they didn't actually disagree. This is the only issue. They showed a number where we also showed a number. So in any case, we've got a lot of work to do, but we have a bold, strong president who will challenge anything, who will lean into anything. He's not reining anyone back. He's trying to empower everyone to lean in. And there's just so many issues where the facts and the human benefits are so overwhelmingly on our side. Despite being outnumbered before, I think we're going to see enormous progress in these 4 years. But Brooke and I and the whole administration would not be here without all of you in this room. God bless you, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you, and thank you for your public service.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, a huge thanks again to our incredible panelists. You know, as Secretary Rollins accurately pointed out, the relationship that energy and agricultural policy play with one another cannot be understated. And so it's incredibly encouraging that we have such incredible leaders like Secretary Rollins, Secretary Wright, and President Trump, who are stalwart in their mission to promote American energy abundance and agricultural abundance. So to that end, to continue the conversation, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our third panel that is entitled Fueling Agriculture, Powering the World. So would you please join me in welcoming our panelists, Mrs. Tate Bennett, who's the Director of AFPI's Rural Policy Team, and Representative Ashley Hinson. Please give them a warm welcome.
Well, good. Are we on?
We're on.
We are
Good morning.
on. Well, good morning, everyone. What an act to follow, but in the spirit of strong conservative females, I think that was a good segue to talk about an issue that's super important to the Secretary of Agriculture, as you all just heard. So I am joined, Tate Bennett, Director of Rural Policy here at the America First Policy Institute. It's a relatively new effort as of February for us to delve into this policy space. And we are so excited to be joined by you, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson from the 2nd District of Iowa. She's been an amazing champion, and I didn't tell you this when we were visiting before. So we actually met. So she was first elected in 2020 and joined in January of 2021 when DC, we busted through all of the lockdowns, and there was a group of ag-minded women in agriculture, and all got together, just excited to talk about policy issues at that time. And we're so happy to bring it back to this stage.
And we've come a long way since 2021. Thank goodness.
A long ways. We could actually be at a restaurant, so this is great. Well, first of all, so obviously, like I just shared, I've gotten to know you and your team over the years. I would love, before we dive into just ag and biofuels policy, just tell us a little bit about why you ran for Congress. You're obviously on the esteemed House Appropriations Committee. I think Secretary Rollins just left, but you actually control the USDA budget in a way.
If it passes.
You get in ideas, right? Yeah. But could you go ahead and tell us a little bit of just about who you are, why you ran for Congress?
Yeah, so at the heart of it, I started my career as a journalist before I got into politics. So I spent 11 years doing the morning news. So if you were waking up early, 4:30 to 7 a.m., I was the anchor, getting people out of bed in the morning. But I also was out in our communities reporting. And so I was telling Iowan stories, hearing what worked really, really well, what didn't work well in our communities, and seeing kind of in the political sphere what policies were successful. So I kind of took that. I wanted to stop talking about it and start doing something about it. And so in 2016, I ran for the State House, served there for 2 terms, and then ran for Congress in 2020, flipped a seat from Democrat to Republican in 2020. And, you know, at the heart of a lot of what I work on here in Washington, D.C., I'm a mom. I have 2 boys. They're 14 and 12. Max just got his learner's permit, so pray for us. We're doing the driving thing and marching band thing, and so we're really busy at home, but I think that gives me a unique perspective here, you know, being a working parent, kind of being able to drive policies that affect families, and again, tell Iowan stories here in Washington, D.C. It really drives me to do this job.
Of course, and it's been so neat to get to know female professionals, strong conservatives that are moms, because we can multitask. And you have hit the ground running, by and large, a strong up-and-comer in the House, and you've been very successful. And I want to get to your record here in a minute. But as the Secretary Rollins alluded to earlier, so the President is very familiar with biofuels, which is very native to your state. In 2023, I actually want to read this quote, and you were there, I am sure. In Council Bluffs, he stated, "No president has ever been close to me when it comes to supporting the farmers." And that is true. But if he's saying that in Iowa, he's indicative of corn, ethanol, and biofuels. Can you tell us a little bit about why that policy matters so much in the state and kind of what your record reflects, how you've been helpful to it?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, President Trump is an America First president. He's a farmers first president. He will never abandon American farmers. He knows that they are the people who sent him to the White House. And I think it's really important that we continue to echo a lot of the policy coming out of the administration that is designed to help our farmers with markets. And you look at what we produce. We grow a lot of things really, really well in Iowa. 60% of our corn goes to ethanol and biofuels. So we need markets. We need places for our our grain to go. That's why these policies that the administration is supporting are so critical for ethanol and for things like SAF, which is that new and that next frontier for American innovation. We're seeing so much research and development in this space and advancement. It's absolutely critical for us to be competitive on the global stage, but also to make sure our farmers have markets for their products to go to. So that's where, when I look at what we can do in Congress, I've been a huge supporter of year-round E15. I don't love that we just are on a constant, we're doing that every single year. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but making sure we could make that policy permanent and then continue to support ways where we can, have these domestic markets for our products that we grow so well in Iowa.
No, thank you for flagging some of those issues that you're following. And a lot of them actually fall in front of AFPI alum, now Administrator Lee Zeldin, who I know you've gotten to work with very closely. You mentioned sort of the E15 rule. What else are you sort of looking at? Well, not necessarily rulemaking, but emergency waivers. But what else are you sort of looking at in Lee Zeldin's purview?
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm so impressed by this entire administration, and obviously a tough act to follow with both the secretaries on the stage, but they are really taking a different look at the regulatory framework. We had 4 years of America Last policy where they just put every blockade up to stymie business and to stymie innovation in these spaces. And it was designed for political reasons, not for actual policy reasons. And so what I appreciate about Administrator Zeldin, and we had FTC Chair Ferguson in before our committees that I serve on, and all of these people are looking at regulations differently, right? They're saying, are these actually designed to have an impact? Are they needed? Or are they to further enhance a political agenda? So that's what I love about this administration and how they're approaching the regulatory framework, and specifically with Administrator Zeldin. We're, in Iowa, we're pretty happy with the RVO recommendations. We're looking forward to seeing those get across the finish line as well.
No, that's helpful to know too. And we are finally with an administration of freedom makers and not freedom takers, right? Yep. Totally. I want to back up just a little bit, and Secretary Rollins may have alluded to this earlier. Can you just, this is a panel on energy and biofuels, but can we just take a step back? The president, as I said, is there for the American farmer. Can you speak to us a little bit? You're out in Iowa, across the state. What is the current state of the farm economy? Because I think that's key to understanding why these policies are so critical.
Yeah. Well, and farmers have had a really tough go. I mentioned, 4 years of President Biden where he was just trying to put up every blockade. There was no single new trade deal done under President Biden's watch. So thank goodness we have an America First president who is focused on trade deals, peace deals, and budget deals, right? And ultimately, our farmers want access to these markets. So it's about the domestic opportunities for us, but it's also about trade deals and where we can find places to sell. Input prices have been incredibly high these last several years, and add that in with the regulatory environment that just adds cost after cost. Fuel, farmers are huge consumers of fuel, so when you had diesel prices and gas prices that were so high, what does that do? That drives up the price for everybody in terms of their inputs. So fertilizer and fuel costs were so high these past several years that it has put us in a kind of a tough spot right now. That's why these deals are so critical, and making sure we're taking care of our farmers with policies that can help them be successful.
That's right. And those prices have also compounded the fact that we have this perfect storm kind of between weather and global events. We have a lot of corn this year.
Yeah, and we're kind of victims of our own success, right? We have precision agriculture equipment that helps us to do more with less. And if you look at, what we were outputting in the 80s versus what we're outputting now versus the inputs, that chart has completely gone the other direction. So we've got a lot more that we're producing even in drought years. The products are so much more resilient and can produce even in really bad conditions. So we're hardy people and we grow hardy crops, and we need places for now those crops to all go.
Well, amazing. Well, thank you for being such a champion for diversifying the fuel supply. It has been of the utmost importance to the president, as Oliver mentioned earlier.
Well, and I think what's really, really neat about how we do agriculture in Iowa is that we are constantly innovating, right? We're looking for new places, new markets, new uses for every single part of the corn kernel, and so it's really fun to watch.
No, totally. That leads into my next question. I'm familiar with this concept, but maybe some in the room are not. I know USDA has some rural development programs under the Secretary's purview that can help prod it along, but tell us a little bit about the broader bioeconomy. I know that's sort of a hot issue in Iowa and sort of the Midwest, but tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I think it's really neat to watch how all of the research and innovation has expanded the use for every single ounce of a corn kernel, right? You look at all the products that corn is a part of. It's a part of, obviously, fuel, which is one of the things that drives our economy in Iowa, but it's also down to things like cosmetics. If you look at, the list of ingredients, I think most people wouldn't realize, oh yeah, there might be actual corn in my powder that goes on my face, right? So it is literally in everything, and when you look at the bioeconomy and how important that is how our farmers are going to continue to exist. It's making sure that the byproducts can go into animal feed, but they can also go to new markets like the South Pacific, where they're using more of these products to feed fish. So the industry there, that is growing these fish as well. But you look at in Iowa, we have a project working with Iowa State. They've enhanced using soy, a road sealer. So there's a demonstration project in my district. So this could actually now have an impact on infrastructure and its longevity, right? So there are so many places where we need to be making those critical investments. I think that the big beautiful bill and what we were able to pass in the working families tax cuts to provide not only the certainty for R&D, but allowing people to make those investments, that's really critical. And then on the appropriation side, we've been focused on trying to target those resources to the programs that are incentivizing that development as well.
Super helpful just to get a broader perspective of what sort of new markets you guys are looking at for some of your crops. So another question, kind of pivoting, and I know it's on the docket for later today, but just more parochially, we cover all rural policy areas here at AFPI, and one issue impacting rural America, there's a lot of talk on data centers. They're here very energy intensive. Administrator Lee Zeldin has prioritized being able to champion America First, being in this space and unleashing the power of AI. Can you tell us a little bit about the related data centers, what you're hearing back home, and kind of what you view as an America First agenda for that?
Well, I think it comes down to two parts. Number one, first of all, people are very excited about these investments. Cedar Rapids, for example, which is in my district, we have QTS and Google making huge investments in data centers. We're talking billions of dollars in investment right into Cedar Rapids. So that's real jobs, that's helping support the trades. So it's twofold. It's making sure we have the right energy policy to help support the need that's coming, energy and water policy coming into AI and these data centers, but also the workforce. So when we did the rollout for the Google data center, we had the representative from the Carpenters Union and the trade unions there. So it's a really neat partnership as they're working to skill up and scale up the workforce to match the needs of these data centers going forward. I think that's really critical, and we're leading on that in places like Iowa. And then the other part of that I think is really important, why it's absolutely critical to get the government out of the way of these investments, because we have to win the AI battle. China is making these investments and moving at a very, very fast pace. They don't have the same regulatory burdens that we do. They just don't care about the environment. They don't care about their people like we do. And so we automatically are up against, just a little bit more headwind there. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to get those burdens out of the way. I just met with an energy company yesterday. They're rescaling up the Duane Arnold Energy Center, which is a nuclear power plant in my district. And we're looking at more opportunities for small nuclear as well. So that's why the intersection of, the EPA policy on the environmental regulatory side, but then also the energy policy and moving those things forward faster, it's how we're going to win the AI race and compete with China.
Well, that provides a very holistic picture on why the rural piece is so critical to the broader energy discussion, biofuels and beyond, certainly. So I have a fun question. I'm not sure how many folks in the room have actually been to the Iowa State Fair. This is a mission critical
topic.
Any
hands in the room?
Today.
Actually more than I would thought.
All right, more than I thought
Pretty
as
good.
well. Well, of course, I see some logical hands there in the back. But tell us a little bit about the significance of the Iowa State Fair, and more importantly, if anyone here is ever able to make it there, what should they eat?
Well, the list is long of what you should eat, so I can get you the whole menu. I'll give you the Ashley's, cliff notes to the Iowa State Fair. I think what's great about the Iowa State Fair is it really is agriculture on full display. You get to see how an animal is raised. I think a lot of people don't have the appreciation. They think food comes from the grocery store and fuel comes from the gas station. And actually being able to go out and see the genesis of all of that on full display and the innovation, right? So you think about telling the story of all the different products that corn is in. They might have a trailer that has the full story and the list of products, so you can go and see, oh yeah, well this is the trickle-down impact of why agriculture matters to me when I'm buying a cosmetic at the store. So that's really, really great about what's on display at the Iowa State Fair. Gosh, you just really eat your way through the fair. If you don't have a pork chop on a stick, you've done something wrong. Bacon on a stick, lots of things on a stick. We fry things really well in Iowa as well. My favorite food is the pickle dog, which is a pickle spear wrapped in cream cheese, and then you can do like meat around it, and you can either have it cold or you can deep fry that too. So I recommend it. It has something green in it, so that's what I say is like
maha.
Yeah,
Maha.
exactly. Yeah. Right. It's like the low carb option.
Totally.
Unless you fry it and dip it in batter first. But I highly recommend the Iowa State Fair. And then, of course, it's the political, like, ground zero for everything, right? If someone wants to run for president, they're coming to the Iowa State Fair. And I think there's nothing better than just you're out walking, you're eating the pickle dog, and you run into, at the time, President Trump was out at the Iowa State Fair, or Ron DeSantis, or any of the candidates. Like, they were all just walking around at the Iowa State Fair with, a couple people on their staff. But everybody wanted to be accessible. And our governor, Kim Reynolds, spends a lot of time at the Iowa State Fair. And she was just there every day, just walking around and talking with Iowans. So that's what I love about it. It's, we prove that we are accessible and transparent as representatives, and then we get to go and just, again, celebrate all of Iowa.
I think Governor Reynolds actually competed in a steer competition with Secretary Rollins. Yep. As well. So not just there every day.
There's the wife
working.
calling competition. That's pretty impressive. And then I didn't get to participate in it, but there's a fiddling competition that's really great too. I play the fiddle.
Speaking of music, so you're running a very aggressive Senate race as well. Speaking of the Iowa State Fair. I have full faith in you, but in the event this doesn't work out, tell them about your backup plan.
Yeah, my backup plan is you'll find me busking on the corner playing the fiddle with my case open. But no, I actually classically trained violinist and pianist. I was in the Des Moines Symphony for 2 years, and my parents wanted me to be a professional violin player, so I was looking at going into that field, and then I got the journalism bug in high school, and so I actually played all through college, and then when I got back to Cedar Rapids, I joined a Jimmy Buffett cover band. Woo. So I like to joke, I can play anything from Mozart to Margaritaville, and I take requests.
Well, very good. Maybe next year we'll have to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, I play a mean national anthem, so there you go. Yeah.
I have one final question. I just kind of alluded to some of your undertakings statewide. Tell us a little bit about how that's going, and maybe who are some of your mentors in the Senate at this point. We work a lot with Mark Wynne-Wellen, for example. His wife is the chair of my center. Tell us a little bit about your mentors.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Joni. I know she's not here today, but it was kind of shocking that she announced that she wasn't seeking re-election this cycle. And so, big combat boots to fill in Joni, and she's actually the reason why I ran for Congress in the first place. She called me the day after the election in 2018, after the House had flipped, and she said, "Ashley, you got to step up and run." So she's been my mentor here for many, many years. We've had many late night texts and rant sessions and vent sessions during the Biden administration. So she helped me get through that, and I've learned so much from her and her service here. So I'm looking forward to, again, filling her shoes, but I know I have some big shoes to fill. So she's been my mentor out here. But back in Iowa, it's Linda Upmeyer. She was our first Speaker of the House in Iowa, and woman Speaker of the House. And the best advice she ever gave me was, I can't even remember what I was mad about that day, but I'm back in Linda's office and just venting. And she goes, "Oh, honey, for some things, there's prayers. For everything else, there's a big glass of wine at the end of the day." And you just kind of file little pieces of advice like that away, and they help get you through the tough times here where you just want to, beat your head against a wall and government shutdowns and all of that. It just helps you put everything in perspective. But I've had some great women mentors to help guide me as I take things on.
And keep us grounded.
That's
well,
right.
Thank you so much for being here. We wish you the best of luck over the next year or so, and we hope you will come back and we can follow up on some of the president's further accomplishments.
Of course, lots to do ahead in the next couple months. So
Looks like
thank
you
you
don't
so
rest.
much for having me. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I am acutely aware I'm the only thing standing between you and the restroom and the coffee line, so we'll make it real quick. I want to thank Congresswoman Hinson for a great presentation. Just two quick things. Number one, want to thank the person who made this entire inaugural Energy Summit possible, the indomitable, the wonderful patriot from Texas, Kat Wall. Kat, thank you very much for making today possible. And then secondly, when I tell people, Mayor Angela, where I'm from, and I say New Jersey, usually people chuckle. It's like, what good could come out of Jersey? Well, we just want to take 2 minutes of your time to tell you some really good news. And you might have heard there's a governor's race there that's really within the margin of error. At the core of what's happening in our troubled home state is our dramatically successful efforts to beat the Green News scam. And so after last year's big win in November, when we were looking to expand the number of our state chapters, we were at 5 then, we're up to 10 now, but the 6th state chapter was planted in New Jersey because we saw 2 awesome patriots who were taking on the left in a dark blue state and winning. And of course, one is Congressman Jeff Van Drew, who led the charge against offshore wind. And again, our troubled home state, there's not a lot of natural things going in our favor, but our Jersey shore is awesome. The other person is Mike Donohue, who led the litigation efforts, the grassroots efforts, the lobbying efforts, all efforts above to kill offshore wind, to save our beaches in Jersey. So just want to take a minute of your time to introduce our AFPI New Jersey State Chair, Mike Donohue, who made the impossible possible when everyone in Trenton, all the political elite, both parties, the uniparty in Trenton was foursquare behind offshore wind, would ruin our shores. Mike and Congressman Van Drew made it possible to defeat them. So Mike, over to you.
My friend Martin, thank you, Martin. Hey, can you say a few words? Sure. This is a great America First story, and some of you know it. If you don't, it's interesting, and I've got just a couple minutes. I know everybody wants to get to that break. But if you Google David defeats Goliath and offshore wind and press of Atlantic City, you'll find a great story with a pretty good picture of me that I was happy about. From 21 to 23, I was special counsel for offshore wind for Cape May County, New Jersey. You know, the farce of offshore wind is well known. There's plenty of information out there. It's been exposed. It's a fraud. It doesn't work, and it is environmentally disastrous. Imagine hundreds of thousands of acres of the ocean floor literally destroyed. Every organism, everything at the bottom of the food chain, every clam, every scallop, everything destroyed for the installation of 1,000-foot high towers to hold offshore wind turbines. It is absolutely devastating. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the final environmental impact statement for Vineyard Wind off of Nantucket said that this project will have no positive benefit for climate change. And they have repeated that through every permitting process for every offshore wind project. It is a lie when they say that offshore wind will help with climate change. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The pressure that was brought to bear in New Jersey was immense. It was the Biden administration. It was the Murphy administration in Trenton. It was elected officials up and down both sides of the aisle, frankly, and it was a lot of money. Offshore wind depends on all of your money, my money, the American taxpayers' money to have any chance of success whatsoever. I say if we could all get together and build a bar and restaurant and make somebody else pay for half the construction costs, we would make a lot of money. And that's what these people sought to do with American taxpayers' money. There was tremendous pressure. They offered to hire me. They offered me a lot of money to get me out of the game. That pressure, when I refused that, turned to, you're making a fool of yourself. Everybody who's smart knows this is inevitable. Everybody who's smart is going to make money off of Ørsted. I didn't take the bait, and I'm happy that I did not. This was sort of off the radar, really, until the whales and dolphins started dying in numbers that were unprecedented throughout 2021, 2022, into 2023. And what was going on that wasn't going on before? Survey, seismic, sonar, surveying off the Jersey shore. And their answer was, well, we don't know what's killing the whales, but we know it's not us. Those two things don't really fit together. And I bless the whales because they really did change public opinion. At that point, our commission director, Len Desiderio, who's also the mayor of Sea Isle City, had 9 dolphins strand themselves and have to be euthanized on the beach in Sea Isle City. And he came to me and said, what do we have to do to stop this? And I said, everything, which is what we did. We set out literally on land, in the air. We flew banner planes up and down the Jersey Shore saying, stop big wind, go to this website and find out how. We supported and incubated grassroots groups to rise up against these offshore wind companies and carry that message on the street. We went to the Board of Public Utilities in New Jersey and fought a battle there. We went into the New Jersey Superior Court, into the Appellate Division, into the D.C. Circuit to throw up every possible roadblock we could. I'll tell you a quick story. I went to the Board of Public Utilities to argue against Ørsted taking public land for their private use. And when I got there, the board members of the Board of Public Utility were wearing wind turbine lapel pins. It was a kangaroo court at its worst. But we persevered. We were relentless. Our efforts on this front, despite their denial that we had an impact, along with a little bit of help from our AutoPen president's spiraling inflation, had Ørsted sail back to Copenhagen on Halloween 2023. It is now my favorite holiday. The next morning, we held a press conference where the David defeats Goliath story was born to make sure that the story was told about how you have to act. You have to be relentless. You have to fight on every front. What is the message now? This is not over. People think this is over. It is not. They are pursuing this every day in the halls of Congress, in the halls of state houses, all along the coast, both coasts. They are just lying in wait. So we, from a policy perspective, have to advance policies that will shut this down, support the president in his efforts, and change the laws that Congress has passed that allow offshore wind in the continental shelf. And if we can do that, then at some point we can kill this environmental disaster once and for all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a 10-minute break. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes sharp. Thank you very much.
Please welcome back to the stage David Vasquez.
Well, good morning again. Great to see you all. For the next panel, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Luke J. Lindberg, the Undersecretary of Agriculture for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, to kickstart our next panel. So would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Lindberg? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? There it is. Gosh, it's always hard to come after Brooke Rollins. Matching her energy is challenging for me every single day of the week, but certainly love the opportunity to work for Brooke and for President Trump as our U.S. Department of Agriculture's chief diplomat around the world. So thank you all for welcoming me here this morning. A little tidbit about myself and the America First Policy Institute. So I have been, up until I was confirmed for this role at USDA, a senior fellow with AFPI for the past several years, working alongside Dr. Mike Faulkner and many other members of the team on the Center for American Prosperity. And so it's great to be back. It feels like a homecoming in many respects to be with you all this morning. And so I just want to say, nice to be here. And one of the things that I worked quite a bit on during my time at AFPI was developing the Farmer First agenda. And so that was a key priority for our organization, to develop a program and an opportunity to help tell the rural prosperity story. And I think Tate Bennett is somewhere here in the room, or she's walking around backstage. But if you haven't met Tate yet, she is an incredible resource. She's very well plugged in and been incredibly helpful to us at USDA to develop the right policies and the right efforts to put our farmers and ranchers first. And I love seeing a guy with a cowboy hat walking down the middle of the lane here. I think you might be with the president later today is what I'm hearing. So it's been a great pleasure. Ambassador Kip Tom, who is the vice chair for the Farmer First agenda, and I helped develop the basic construct for that a couple of years ago, and it's great to see that effort moving forward. But we're here today to talk about energy. And a lot of people often wonder what the intersection is between American energy dominance and the farmer first agenda. And it actually crosses over a number of different sectors and segments, but the one that I've been focused on a lot, and I'm pleased to talk to you just very briefly this morning about, is the intersection around biofuels. And the beauty of American biofuels right now is that our farmers and ranchers have invested in innovation that has made them more productive than any other place in the entire world. If you look at the crop production statistics for American farmers, it is astounding. Somewhere around 50 to 60 bushels of corn per acre is the global average around the world. Right now, here in America this year, we're anticipating about 187 bushels of corn per acre across our farms here in the United States of America. That's an incredible difference, right? Thank you. And so as many of our colleagues around the world, the partners in the countries we work in, seek to adopt these sustainability goals, which may be different than we have here in the United States, we want to make sure that our farmers and ranchers are at the forefront of their minds on helping them deliver not only on their sustainability goals, which again are driven internally in those countries, but also we believe that our biofuels can help them reduce the price at the pump in many scenarios to help them meet a dual mandate of increasing sustainability and decreasing costs for their domestic markets. And we do that because our folks are able to innovate at this high level, right? It gives us more and more crop production per acre. And when I talk to these folks, and I was just recently in Japan, Taiwan, the UK, headed to Israel next week, and more around the world, one of the things I often say to these folks is you really have a handful, a small basket of countries to pick from if you're trying to meet your biofuels goal. And those small basket of countries are not really great actors. You can choose palm oil coming out of Indonesia, and they're tearing down their rainforests in order to increase production. You can choose Brazil, which is a whole host of baskets of issues for many folks, which is also tearing down rainforests in order to increase production. You can choose China, who uses fake used cooking oil, basically from soybean oil production, to meet the demand that they're producing for their soybean meal, which goes into their hogs. Or you can choose American ethanol, American biodiesel, and American sustainable aviation fuel that's actually being produced using fewer acres of ground every year to produce more. That's a true statistic. We are planting fewer acres every year, but we're actually producing more and more crop. And the challenges that I'm sure the Secretary spoke about this morning related to the farm economy is driven in large part because our supply continues and continues and continues to increase every year. And we need markets to sell that supply into. And biofuels is one of the key components of an all-of-the-above energy policy that not only delivers for the markets overseas where we're selling this stuff, but it also delivers rural prosperity here at home in America. And we all believe and we know that farmers and ranchers have President Trump's back, and that's a key component of the overall America First agenda. So thank you all very much for taking a few minutes to hear a little bit about these stories. One last piece is I just wanted to share, when I was in the UK recently, they are aggressively pursuing a carbon reduction policy. And right now, the historic trade agreement that President Trump signed put American ethanol at the forefront of the opportunity to meet that demand for them. Unfortunately for the UK, their last two ethanol plants, which have been very outdated for a very long time, are likely going under before the end of this year. And what will happen is, through the negotiated agreement that President Trump put forward, American ethanol will provide 100% of the ethanol that goes into the UK every year going forward. We are essentially being the sole provider for that market, and I think that's something we should cheer for. Thank you very much. So the president's aggressive trade agenda, we're making sure that American energy is at the forefront of the minds of our partners around the world. We're looking to deliver on the opportunities that they want, and our farmers and ranchers stand ready to do that. And so thank you all again for having me this morning. You have a great pleasure of hearing right after me here from a wonderful panel of folks. So it's my pleasure to introduce, we have Senator Husted from the great state of Ohio, Dr. Jacob Olidort, who is part of the AFPI family here, and my good friend Jacob Hellberg, who is the Undersecretary for the Economic Team at the U.S. Department of State. He's a close colleague of mine. He just got confirmed. You're one of the first groups, I think, to be hearing from him. And know that Jacob and I are out there promoting American energy dominance around the world each and every day. Thank you all very much for what you're doing here at AFPI, and God bless.
Well, good morning. Unfortunately, one casualty of the Democrats' shutdown tactics is the planning for our panel. And unfortunately, Undersecretary Hellberg is unable to join us this morning. So that's very unfortunate. But we are very happy to have a little bit more time with the great Senator John Husted of the great state of Ohio. Senator Husted, thank you so much for your time and sharing your morning with us.
Yes, it's not. I voted 11 times to keep the government open, so it's not my fault. It's the Schumer shutdown.
There you go. Exactly. Just by way of brief background, John Husted began serving Ohioans in the United States Senate in January 2025. For more than 2 decades, the people of Ohio have trusted him to fight for their jobs, values, and families. Prior to that, he served as the state's lieutenant governor, where he oversaw the Ohio Common Sense Initiative and served as the director of the governor's Office of Workforce Transformation. He launched Innovate Ohio to cut costs and end bureaucratic waste. One of the regulatory reforms Husted achieved was utilizing artificial intelligence to remove 5 million words from the regulatory code, providing real regulatory reform. He had a long, distinguished career in the Ohio legislature, which included as its speaker, as well as leading its elections as its Secretary of State. The senator has prioritized keeping Ohio communities safe by securing millions of dollars of funding for law enforcement and by working in the United States Senate to secure the border. In the Senate, he voted to protect women, girls, and their sports, and to give law enforcement more tools to convict criminals who've helped flood Ohio communities with fentanyl that is stealing lives. He has also worked to protect children from online predators. Senator Husted's track record of defending the rights of women, children, and the unborn began in his own family. His adoption has made him a faithful pro-family leader and advocate for parents and their children. In the 119th Congress, the senator serves on the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the Committee on Environment and Public Works, and the Special Committee on Aging. Senator, thank you again so much.
Glad to be able to join you today. Thank you very much.
I'd like to open with a question that's peripherally related, but I think is key to setting the tone for this conversation, and that is on economic development and growth. And this really speaks to your assignment on the Small Business Committee, but also all of your previous experiences. But how do you view, and especially your support of the American Innovation and Jobs Act, the role of economic development, specifically here at home, as well as looking for opportunities abroad that strengthen our economy here? How do you view that as key to achieving energy dominance?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to join you today and share some thoughts. By way of context, off and on I've worked on economic development my whole life in both the private and public sectors. So it is very important to me now at a personal level, because Ohio is one of those states, like many in the Midwest, industrial states that hit tough times, where we had people leaving our state due to and factories closing, disinvestment, because of the fact that we had a convergence of events like globalization, trade deals, automation, all of those things impacting the manufacturing economy. And of course, the Midwest originally had remember, a manufacturing economy because of the availability of oil and gas and coal and natural resources that allowed us to build that during the Industrial Revolution. But then over time, we lost our edge. And I've been on both sides of that. I was on the side of it when factories were closing, like the one that my dad worked at. But also, I've also been part of that reformation in Ohio, where we did tax reform, tort reform, regulatory reform, all of these different things to take Ohio from the 39th worst state to do business to the 5th best. And now we're seeing new investment coming to our state for a lot of reasons. But I would add this, that we're seeing new investment coming to America because we've realized as a nation that we need to do more made in America for our economic and national security. That we need to make the things and have a supply chain for the things that are critical for economic security. And you know what those things are, everything from rare earth to chips to pharmaceutical supply chain, those things that are really important to have in times of crisis and for our national security, that all of our weapon systems that are critical and the technology that supports it, that needs to be domestically sourced or at least friend sourced so that we know that it's there in a time of crisis, because China is not engaged in a friendly competition with us. They're interested in domination. And if you're going to make more things in America, you're going to have that supply chain. And then we're going to lead in AI, the dominant emerging technology. We're going to need more energy. You got to power all of these things. If you're going to do electric cars, they need electricity. If you're going to do more manufacturing is very energy intensive. And if you're also going to pay attention to the rules of supply and demand, and we're going to fight inflation, and we know that energy costs are a leading input cost to the cost of production, from the food on our tables to the things that we make, then we have to have ample supply to make sure that it is not inflationary. This has been a long time in coming, since 2015, the Paris Climate Accords, and when, for a variety of reasons, we started taking energy offline and not replacing it with energy that has the characteristics of being available 24/7, 365. And now we're in a difficult situation where we're seeing we see on the horizon an emerging lack of supply of energy to meet the demands that America needs. And we need to treat it with the sense of urgency that requires. And among the things that we need to do are permitting reforms, some of the things that we are involved in, and we can talk more about that. But that is the context in which economic development, our conversations around inflation and cost of living and energy converge from my point of view.
That's excellent. And we'll touch on a particular form of energy that you care about a lot, nuclear energy, in a moment. But permitting you mentioned, and I remember this, I have scars still as a Hill staffer on the HISGAC committee working on permitting reform, and it's a very painful but important process. But on the environment piece of this, talk about your leadership on this specific issue. How important is the permitting reform that we need to be doing right now to put us in a dominance position as far as environmental change?
I think it's essential. It is so hard to get things permitted and online in a reasonable amount of time. My expertise at this is more at the state level than it is the federal level, but they're all integrated in many ways. I should have given you some background. I became a U.S. Senator when J.D. Vance became Vice President, so I was not planning on being here, but J.D. goes and gets elected Vice President. They need somebody to take the job and to fill in ably for him, and so I was willing to do that. But these issues all matter, because if you decided you wanted to build a power plant and you wanted to put those electrons on the grid, how long would it take? A decade? Not just to get the plant permitted, but to also get the lines permitted that would take it and put it on the grid. I mean, that if you can't talk about these issues with a sense of urgency and say, well, we can solve this by just doing things the way that we have done them. It's not possible. So in our committee, we are trying to identify, and Shelley Moore Capito is a great chair of that committee. We're trying to identify every bipartisan piece of legislation that we can identify to get that moving in the next couple of weeks. I have several of those policies that I think are bipartisan in nature. And the reason I have hope for this is because I think many Democrats are experiencing now the frustrations that Republicans experienced. You know, the Keystone Pipeline, they shut that down. Well, how do you like it when your wind and solar projects get shut down? And by the way, and I think many of them recognize that nuclear energy is one of the forms of energy, the only form of energy where you can have baseload energy that's zero carbon. And so you have a number of Democrats that recognize if they care about climate change, that one of the ways to help resolve that is to improve the permitting process for innovation, for transmission, all of the kinds of things that need to occur if you're going to develop these in the time frames that we need to be able to accomplish them. And I think that there's a recognition on their part that they need to come to the table on this. I will choose to be optimistic that we can get that done, even in an environment where we can't even get them to vote to open up the government. I'm hopeful that they will consider their own selfish interests in doing this, because I know many of them see the emerging problems. Because think about it. You can't. We all know that if you're going to lead in AI, and at the rapid pace that data centers are being built, that energy demand is going to grow rapidly. They know that. They also have to understand, and I know that they do, that supply and demand actually does matter, and that you're going to drive up the cost of all energy if you don't have ample supply. And in the past, they have been willing to do that, but I think that there is a recognition that that is a failed strategy, and hopefully they will come to the table for some bipartisan regulatory reform.
Timely words that many need to listen to, obviously. But so drilling down a little bit more on nuclear. So you co-sponsored the Nuclear Refuel Act with Ranking Member Whitehouse. So countries like France and Japan are reprocessing their spent fuel to strengthen their energy security and expand the life cycle of their nuclear energy. With the goal of energy independence and dominance in mind, shouldn't the United States be doing the same? And what is stopping us, in your view, from reclaiming that capability here at home instead of relying on others?
Yes, so recycling spent nuclear fuel is proven technology. It's being used in France and Japan, but France is probably the most advanced at doing this. I think 10% of their nuclear fuel comes from recycled uranium, spent nuclear fuel. And we have in America about 90,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel, around 70 facilities in this country. You have disposal issues that still are unresolved with a lot of that spent nuclear fuel. And we have companies who are willing to do this in the United States, to use that spent nuclear fuel to recycle, but they need regulatory certainty as to how to do this. They want to know what the permitting process is for doing that, and that's what the Refuel Act does. Creates a streamlined, in law, so that the companies that are investing billions to do this will know that they have a single process to go through, not a dual track process like right now I think the law would suggest that they would need to go through. And they can get permitted through the Nuclear Regulatory Agency and do it swiftly. And Sheldon Whitehouse is my co-lead on this from Rhode Island, and I believe that we can get this accomplished. We tried to get it in the NDA. We couldn't get it done. I do think it is a national security issue, an economic and national security issue, hopefully we can get this accomplished. To put it in context, I was doing some work with my AI partner last night, trying to figure out exactly how much energy this would create. And conservatively, just taking the spent nuclear fuel that we already have would power all of the data centers in the country for 40 years. So that's how much we have right there, readily available to repower and to power new types of nuclear reactors. All we have to do is get a permitting process, and we'll unleash billions of dollars in investment in making it happen. So I hope that we can get that done over the next couple of weeks. There's a companion bill led by Bob Latta in the House of Representatives, so I think we have bicameral, both chambers' support and bipartisan support to get it done.
No, that's excellent and very exciting to hear about. And I guess take us around the world a little bit. As you look around and look at the president's incredible achievements diplomatically, all these peace agreements, what are the opportunities as you see it, and what are the challenges in trying to achieve energy dominance for ourselves and through our work with our partners?
Well, the global impact of this is certainly significant, considering the fact that we have a war between Russia and Ukraine, and that America gets 30% of its nuclear fuel from Russia. That number is, I think, even higher in Europe. So we're literally funding the people who are prosecuting this war, Vladimir Putin. The same is true of natural gas, why our exports of LNG, if they can increase and if they can supply Europe, Europe can stop buying, I think, the 20% of the natural gas that powers Europe being purchased from Russia right now. And so these have, you can see how our economic policies and our national security policies for us and our allies are interwoven and important to detangle and to put an America First agenda at work on this. You help American industry. You help defund the war that Vladimir Putin is prosecuting in Ukraine. And so all of those things, and I know our European allies want more natural gas from America. I know that I was with several NATO countries, and I kept pressing them, where do you get, because they were pressing us on secondary sanctions on anyone who buys, they want America to do it. But then we said, well, what about you? What are you doing to decouple your economy and your reliance from Russia? And they, look at their shoes. It takes everybody to get this done, and it has a huge impact that I hope that some of the things that we're working on will, and President Trump's providing great leadership on all of these issues. I didn't even mention the fact of how he's trying to make it easier for data centers to build energy right on campus, right there where they can generate it and don't have to put it up on the grid, that they can build the generation for those AI data centers without the bureaucratic delays and do it immediately. And his leadership on all of these issues, Secretary Wright and others, are just fantastic.
Absolutely. An incredible time, incredible opportunity. We have time for one or two questions from the audience. I wonder if anybody would like to pose a question to the senator. You've answered everyone's questions. Please.
And all our aprons are made in America. We were going to go through China because the price was really cheap. But when the tariffs came out, we had to scratch our heads and figure out, how do we do this in America? Well, in Mount Vernon, North Carolina, they make all the cotton, and they ship it down to Miami, and they make all the aprons. Our first order of aprons is 4 million. Our second order of aprons is 28 million. All done in America, all manufactured in America. So I commend the Trump administration and what you have done to make sure that we bring manufacturers back to America.
Well, it's great. Congratulations. Love to hear the. You love to hear the stories of how, just by creating a fair playing field, that American entrepreneurs invest, they have markets, they can compete, and in many cases, what's wonderful about it is there's so much innovation that can be unlocked through American small businesses, because that's the source of people who maybe left a larger company and can think differently about how to solve problems, and they try to start out, but it's hard to get those customers that you need, particularly if you make a large capital investment and then your Chinese competitor just floods the market and undermines your ability to grow your business. So all of those things, very, very important elements, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you. I'm so glad I'm here. I was late this morning. I'm Karen Alston. I'm a native Pennsylvanian, but I live here in Washington, D.C. You talked about national security and our data centers. One of the things I'm very concerned about and how we educate the American people on is that the grid and our data centers are a national security issue, and how we can form a bipartisan plan to protect the data centers. As the AI is growing, as we are getting much more technologically capable, that this issue is critical for us to win. There is no choice. We have to win this and control this issue. And so I'm hoping that you can share a little bit about what you and your colleagues are talking about of how the energy and the data is protected.
Important question, and I'm not going to pretend like I have all of the answers to that question, because I don't. I think, first of all, if you want to know why is that security, you make the point that the security of our grid, of our energy supply, of our data centers, of our AI technology is an important security question, which means that that's why we have to have a domestic supply chain for all of it, that we cannot we cannot allow ourselves to be dependent on things that come from other places, from countries that are not necessarily friendly to our interests. And I also believe that we have to have to make friendships with allies who have similar interests. Like this week, I thought that the Prime Minister of Australia and the President being here to sign a deal on rare earth issues, important step. All of those things, I saw that NVIDIA is going to work with TSMC to build chips on American soil, high-tech chips on American soil, capacities that we don't have. All of those things are essential for our economic and national security. And cybersecurity attacks on both the grid and on data centers, those are so very important. I think that the one thing that I have leaned in on that in the past is how do you develop the human talent, our young people, our capacity. I often ask this question, how many of you in the audience are certified in AI? Like, I got one hand there, usually like two, maybe to a couple people. So think about this dominant technology that we have, and we lack the human capacity on a broad scale to really understand it or know how to use it, how to protect. And so we need to build that capacity, particularly in our education system. That's why I'm sponsoring legislation to have all 50 states set AI standards to use in the classroom. Yeah, not a federal standard. I don't want the federal government saying this, but require all 50 states to lean in and set a federal or set a state standard for how they're going to use it in the classroom, because all of that human talent is necessary for those cybersecurity and other types of security in our new world.
Well, thank you, Senator, so much for your leadership on all these major important issues that affect our daily lives and the future of our country. And thank you again for your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you for caring and for all you do. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to take this moment to thank my senator, and I'll never get sick of saying that.
I never get sick of hearing it.
Okay. I want to welcome you to our AFPI Energy Summit, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. For those in the audience who don't know you, what was it like growing up in rural Pennsylvania?
First of all, there's a Pennsylvania delegation in the House. Welcome, Pennsylvanians. Good to see the group here. You know, Pennsylvania, for those of you who haven't been there, it offers, it's a microcosm really of America, honestly, because you got these huge urban centers, you've got this incredible rural countryside. Politically, it's extremely diverse. It's very red in those rural areas, it's very blue in those cities. I grew up in the rural part. And I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and you know, I lived there, grew up there outside of Scranton in a place called Bloomsburg, and then went away, served in the Army, moved to Pittsburgh, and jumped around a bit, but kept a farm in that rural community. And I guess the most important thing I could say that led to me running was ultimately being able to come back and see the changes in rural Pennsylvania over 30 years based on really flawed policies, whether it was unfair trading practices, whether it was the fentanyl crisis, whether it was 20 years of war in the Middle East, which was disproportionately borne by many of those rural families, particularly at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. So the microcosm of what happened in Pennsylvania kind of explains what's happened politically over the last 10 years. Pennsylvania is a bellwether for a lot of what's going on in the country, and I think what happened in 2024 was sort of the exclamation point on those previous decades of failure in the right policies for our country.
Well, Dave grew up 2 hours from where I live now, and I can already tell the difference in the policies that you're working on with the president in our rural communities and throughout Pennsylvania. But as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and as a veteran, and thank you for your service, and thank you to all the veterans who are here today, you understand that energy security is national security, better than most people. How have the Trump administration's policies helped strengthen our state's energy security and our national security as a whole?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, President Trump talked about energy dominance in the first administration, took a lot of steps down the path towards energy dominance, but it was central to the second campaign, or central to the 2024 campaign, and the contrast of what Harris and Casey and others were promoting versus what the president was promoting could not have been more clear. And it was essentially started with the premise, and this is particularly true in Pennsylvania, that energy dominance, unlocking our energy capability, fossil fuels, all forms of energy, is the long pole in the tent of economic development. That's certainly clear in Pennsylvania. Number 2 energy producer in the country, number 4 natural gas reserves in the world, and there had been a war against fossil fuels. So when the president came in and said energy dominance is central to our economy, central to bringing manufacturing back home, and central to our national security, it really resonated with people across Pennsylvania. And the Democrats, particularly Casey and Harris, couldn't get out of their own way in terms of talking about fracking, in terms of talking about fossil fuels. They knew it was bad politically, but they couldn't bring themselves to actually embrace the recognition that fossil fuels, and particularly natural gas in Pennsylvania, was a critical part of the future. And so this became, at least in my opinion, probably border in Pennsylvania, border, inflation, and energy policy were the big 3. And I think that was true largely around the country, and it made a huge difference. And the actual national security implications of it, I'll just make 2 points, couldn't be more clear. Think about what happened over the last 20 years when Germany said, you know what, we're not going to embrace nuclear power, we're not going to embrace fossil fuels, we're going to go down this path on clean energy, they became incredibly, almost exclusively dependent on Russia for natural gas. So having energy independence and energy dominance is a key feature of national security. But then second, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, the artificial intelligence revolution is really probably the most significant technology transformation of our lifetimes. It's like the Industrial Revolution on steroids. This is unbelievably consequential. But you can't say AI revolution without saying energy revolution, because they go hand in hand. You can't have AI leadership without energy leadership. And so for America to become the dominant force in artificial intelligence, we also have to remain and continue to be the dominant force in energy, because energy demand is going to triple in the next 15 years or something like that. That is the reason that energy dominance is probably the most important national security priority we could possibly have.
That's fantastic. Let's take that to the local level. How does that result in more jobs, lower bills, and stronger communities in Pennsylvania?
I mean, it's such an exciting moment in our history in Pennsylvania and really in the country. You know, Pennsylvania, I'm obviously biased, but Pennsylvania has sort of been at the heart of all the past revolutions, whether it was the founding of the country 250 years ago, or whether it was the arsenal of democracy, the Monongahela Valley, the steel that really led to our victory in World War II. We are on the brink, maybe in the midst of the next great revolution. And that fight of artificial intelligence, energy dominance, you know, that's taking place with China. China is our prominent adversary. They're our geopolitical foe. That is who we have to be able to overcome militarily, economically. But there's also a battle going on with Georgia and Tennessee and Texas, right? So if you're Pennsylvania, you want to be the place, you want to be the point of the spear for this incredible transformation that's happening, like we have been in the past. And so if you're sitting where I'm sitting, or you're sitting where the governor's sitting, or the legislature, I know we have a number of legislatures here, we have to ask ourselves, you know, capital is like water. It goes the path of least resistance. So how do you make sure that Pennsylvania's assets are made clear? What are our assets? Well, we have incredible energy capability, incredible skilled labor, incredible skilled workers that can meet the needs of building energy infrastructure, data centers. We have fantastic geography. You know, we're on the ocean, and in addition, or have access to the ocean, but in addition to that, we're within 500 miles of 60% of the population. So Pennsylvania, if you were a Martian and landed in America and say, where's the next great revolution going to take place? You'd say Pennsylvania. But we got to get out of our own way. We can't have regulations that stand in the way. We can't make it hard. This tens of billions, hundreds of billions of investment is coming. We had a big energy summit in Pittsburgh in July, $92 billion of investment. $40 billion of data centers, $50 billion of energy infrastructure was announced. So that's the opportunity. And people say, well, you know, should we embrace this AI revolution stuff? I mean, what are the consequences? It's going to be disruptive. It's coming. It's happening. So the choice, in my opinion, this is the case I try to make across Pennsylvania, is do you want to be at the front, or do you want to be the tail that's getting pulled along? And I think we want to be at the front. So what does that mean? Being at the front means we need to have skilled labor to meet the needs. You know, the demands, ironically, I think in Pennsylvania at least, the AI revolution is going to create lots of blue-collar opportunities to build all this infrastructure. So do we have enough welders, pipe fitters, steam fitters, electricians, fabricators? The answer right now is no. So we need skilled labor. We need to make sure that all this energy demand doesn't spike energy cost for our constituents. It's already a worry. It's growing. So we got to get the energy capacity up fast, the transmission capacity up fast to be able to deal with it. And we got to help people get ready for this profound change. You know, we have an aging population in Pennsylvania. It's disruptive. So how do we help blue-collar workers take advantage of the opportunity? How do we help white-collar workers, many of whom are going to be disaffected, embrace this next wave of change and find the opportunities that exist? You know, if you're a journalist or a lawyer, even a software developer, a lot of those jobs are now being replaced or will be replaced by AI. So how do we make sure that, like all big revolutions, the next generation of folks are ready to take advantage of the new opportunities? We don't even know what they are yet, but they're coming. But you got to be agile and ready, and that's I think that's our challenge as policymakers.
Okay, well, I was very excited. Your Energy Summit was amazing. It was a fabulous event, and that kind of capital coming into the Commonwealth, it will be life-changing for a lot of people in Pennsylvania. But what does that mean to the world? What does that $92 billion investment mean from the global sense?
Well, in some ways, it's tiny. That's the remarkable thing. $90 billion announced at a summit in Pennsylvania. Nothing like that's ever happened in the country. Nothing like that's ever happened where you had the energy leadership, the investing leadership, and the hyperscalers all come together. The president came, the cabinet came, we had bipartisan, the governor came. Nothing like that's ever happened, and yet $92 billion is tiny. That's what's in front of us. Trillions of dollars of investing is coming. And so what I like to say in Pennsylvania is, listen, we are much closer to the end of the beginning than the beginning of the end of this journey. Like, we're just in the early stages of what's coming. It is going to be remarkable, and there'll be aspects that are bubble-like, where you have ebbs and flows, so it's going to be disruptive, because that's what happens when you have a lot of change. It's disruptive. So the key is, how do we position ourselves in Pennsylvania and America to navigate this remarkable new world? I was with the president yesterday. He did a lunch in the Rose Garden, and he was talking about the investment. He said that there's $17 trillion of investment that's been committed into the United States. That seems like an unbelievable number, but yet my wife and I were in the Middle East, I guess 2 months ago. We met with the ruler of the United Arab Emirates, MBZ, and he told us he personally had committed to the United States $1.4 trillion of investment, $1.4 trillion from the UAE over the next 10 years. That's $140 billion a year. That's an energy summit and a half every year for the next 10 years from the UAE alone. So the question, I think, for us is, how do we embrace this? How do we lean into it? How do we make sure we take advantage of this moment for all of our citizens? And how do we take the steps to mitigate the downsides, which are coming? There's downsides. That's the way it is with all change. The other thing about the Energy Summit that was really special, it created tens of thousands of jobs, all the investment, but there was 150 media people there. 150 media people. CNBC did the live all day from there, Bloomberg live all day. That was really critical, because it gave dozens of us from Pennsylvania, the business community, the opportunity to get on television and tell the story. Why Pennsylvania? Why would the Martian pick Pennsylvania of all the places that they could invest? And that was great. And then in every newspaper across the country, and certainly in Pennsylvania, front page, this is a big deal. I keep coming back to that, because that's a catalyst for what I hope we'll see a lot more of in Pennsylvania and a lot more of across the country.
Well, it was a fabulous event. I'm looking forward to the next one. Be sure I'm invited. Okay, finally, this is one of my favorite questions. What's something that you've changed your mind about recently in regard to energy?
That's a good question. I don't know if changed my mind about, but gained much greater conviction on is nuclear. The importance, the power of nuclear. And I'll go back in time for just a minute. I made reference to this before, but a long time ago, 2006, I was working in the government. Most of my life's a business career, but I worked for 4 years in the Bush administration, the second Bush administration. And I was the President Sherpa, which is the person that goes along to all these big summits and negotiates on behalf of the president. So I was at the G7 summit in Heiglandem, Germany, and there's 7 leaders in the world, the G7, and there's 7 Sherpas. I'm one of the 7. So I'm in the room with the world leaders. I'm staffing President Bush. And in that meeting, I remember it like it was yesterday, Angela Merkel said, we're going to eliminate all nuclear power in Germany. There's too much political opposition to it. This was all part of the, climate change agenda, but also ridding themselves of fossil fuels, but we're going to get rid of all nuclear. And Sarkozy, the president of France, was in the room and he said, we're doubling down on nuclear power. We're doubling down. That was 20 years ago. Fast forward to today, Germany is completely dependent, as I said before, on Russia and importing natural gas and other forms of energy. And France is 92% of its energy demand is met by nuclear power. So this is a huge source of baseload energy. The technology's moved dramatically. I see my good friend Tim Walsh, Assistant Secretary of Energy here. Chris Wright is a huge proponent as the Secretary of Energy of nuclear power and a real expert. We are making huge strides there, and I think there's enormous opportunity. And the big problem in the past has been the regulatory barriers and the 10-year time frame to get a new reactor. Westinghouse is in Pennsylvania. They made a commitment to build 10 new reactors. There's other big announcements coming. I think nuclear power as a source of baseload power and as not a useful but a necessary part of meeting energy demand over the next 10 to 15 years. If you believe the projections, anywhere from a doubling to a tripling of energy demand in the next 15 years, if you believe that's true, which I believe is true, then you're going to have to, there's no path of incrementalism that gets us there. You got to have game-changing moves that create enormous capacity, and that means radical changes in the regulatory environment too, so you can get production in place much sooner. I think nuclear is going to emerge as a fundamental building block of our energy capacity in the coming years.
That's great. Penn State actually is doing some great work in the small modular reactors.
They have a reactor there, an active reactor.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love to tell the liberal kids that I'm anti-nuclear, and then it's like, well, you just walk past a reactor. Right. So, Senator, I just want to thank you so much for being here today, and thank all of you, and especially our Pennsylvania delegation that made the trek to be with us today. So,
well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and I just want to say, just if you step back to sort of get the bird's eye view, what is happening right now is kind of remarkable in the history of my history of being part of this. I was sort of a soldier in the Reagan Revolution, where we saw really profound changes in the direction of our country and the direction of policy. We're seeing something now that eclipses that, I think, in the profound nature of the change. And you and the Institute and what you've done is the intellectual foundation for much of that. So, it is so exciting to have been part of it, to be on the campaign trail, to run on this agenda, to be, campaigning with the president many times, to hear him lay out this vision, and then to now be 9 or 10 months into it and to see, oh my God, this is something, we haven't thought of before, which is a politician that actually lays out a set of promises and then comes forward and actually does the things that he says he's going to do. That's what's happening right now, an implementation of a set of promises, and those promises are grounded in the incredible work of AFPI and all of you. So thanks for the great support for these important ideas and for our great country, and thanks for having me today.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you, and just thank you for your time, and we're just so glad to be able to have this and convene this. And to finish off our programming, I'd like to welcome AFPI's newest energy member, the Director of the Energy and Environment team here, Mr. Jason Hayes, to deliver our closing remarks. So please give Mr. Hayes a warm welcome.
All right, we've had a lot of up-close and personal details. I'll try to do kind of a 50,000-foot perspective to close, and I'll close with the idea that we're facing a choice. On the one hand, we have a group that's recommending restrictions and energy poverty, more government regulation, that sort of thing. That mindset's probably best typified by, it's about a 50-year-old quote, but it still deals directly with what we're seeing today. It was by a guy named Paul Ehrlich. He wrote a book called The Population Bomb, but in 1975, Ehrlich opined that giving society, human society, abundant energy would be the equivalent of giving an idiot child a machine gun. That's the mindset that's driving a lot of this restrictive sort of energy poverty ideas that we hear. So on the other side, we have energy abundance, what some in the room call energy realism, and an idea of human flourishing. Now, that idea is that we can produce more, we can do more, using energy wisely to promote human health and well-being. So there's your two ideas. Now consider some of the ideas that are driving the energy poverty mindset. The idea is that we're using too much. We should stop consuming. We shouldn't eat beef. We should stop driving our cars. We're using too many resources. We've expanded beyond our ecological footprint, right? We're using more resources than the Earth has. So there's too many people eating too much food. We need to cut the human population. You start digging into these, you read research in that. There was something recently published by the University of Michigan that even said having a backyard garden is bad for the climate because it produces 6 times more CO2 emissions than the average agriculture or traditional agriculture. There was another report that suggested that human breathing is bad for the environment because not only do we emit CO2, we also breathe out methane and nitrous oxide, potent climate change chemicals, right? Okay, so breathing is bad. During COVID, some of the Greens even went so far as to suggest that there was a silver lining to the virus because, as they noted, humans were actually the virus and COVID was the cure. So these are the things that are driving this sort of mindset. But if you're foolish enough to actually fall prey to one of these viruses that plagues the human condition, then you're still doing something bad because now they're even saying that death has a climate change problem because the way that we deal with our loved ones when they pass with burial and cremation, that's bad for the climate too. So you get a picture of whatever it is that you wanted to do as a human, just stop it. Don't, because it's bad for the environment. So they offer solutions. They say we should transition, right? Go away from our traditional historical energy sources. We should change over to EVs and wind and solar. But their solutions aren't really realistic. They have a host of environmental issues associated with wind. So Václav Smil is an author and an energy researcher. He wrote a paper, it's called What I See When I See a Wind Turbine. And Smil explained that at every step along the process to go from mining the minerals to drilling for the oil that we need for the epoxies to make the fiberglass for the blades, to transporting and refining and then manufacturing and then setting up the wind turbine and then operating the wind turbine. At every single step along the way, you need fossil fuels. So the notion that we're just going to transition away and we're going to use wind and solar is really naive and kind of foolish because you can't even run wind and solar without fossil fuels. So there's also a host of other issues, human rights issues associated with wind and solar, forced labor or slavery in China, child labor in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. When you start investigating these things, you see that what we're really doing is just offshoring the environmental impacts of our green energy sources onto the developing world. Well, it's people on the other side of the planet. We don't have to think about that, right? But that's what we're doing. Additionally, as we move more and more to wind and solar, we're seeing other problems like electric grid issues are mounting. We've already heard today examples of things like the UK and Germany, two countries that now have some of the most, if not the most expensive electricity on the planet. Well, they're full on going into their net zero and decarbonization programs, but what is it doing to them? They can't trust their energy and they can't afford their energy. So they're not alone. We see the same thing on this side of the pond too, because California goes through it almost every summer afternoon. California is their utilities are saying things like, well, we need to do, pullbacks. We need you to stop using things like your air conditioner and your TV, and heaven forbid, don't charge your EV because that uses lots of electricity. So we see these things. I just published a paper recently called Shorting the Great Lakes Grids that explains the exact same problems are happening all across the Midwest. So more and more we're seeing the solutions that are offered by the green and the energy restrictions crowd just don't work. So for those that don't know, I also spent many years working in forestry and parks. I was a backcountry ranger in British Columbia. I was a forester in northern British Columbia. And when you're out in the forest in northern British Columbia in December, it's often pretty cold. Okay, at minus 45 Celsius and Fahrenheit's the same right there, so it doesn't matter. Minus 45, if you don't have reliable energy, you can die quickly. So I saw firsthand really what it looks like when you don't have reliable energy. It's not the kind of thing you want to experience. So, but we don't have to. None of this is necessary, right? We can look at, as we heard today, what's facing us. We have growing demand from data centers. We have AI. We have growing populations. We still have the push toward electrification. And American producers, everybody in this room knows, we can meet this demand. That's possible to do. In America First, energy policies can free up our producers and our refiners and our electricity generators and our manufacturers to meet this growing demand. So we say things like thank you to President Trump, Secretary Wright, Administrator Zeldin, Secretary Burgum, Secretary Rollins. Thank you for doing things like pulling us out of the Paris Accord, passing the executive orders to unleash American energy and other things like that, pulling back on the endangerment finding and trying to remove that. We know in this room that America literally has centuries of hydrocarbons under the ground that we can use to meet growing energy demand. We also have innovative people and companies in the room today who are working on new ideas, whether it's new nuclear or other fuels. Those kind of things are happening today, and we can look forward to those being put into play. But it's not just ideas, it's also people. And if you remember another great writer, Julian Simon, you'll know that actually people are our greatest resource. The ultimate resource is what's between our ears, our gray matter, and whether or not we're going to use that intelligently to come up with better ideas. And there was one example of looking forward. About a year ago, I was debating an environmental activist on a public broadcasting station television show, and he noted that he was worried because he was a new grandfather. So he was worried, what kind of planet are we leaving to his grandchild? Well, amusingly, I just had my first grandchild too, and I looked at his idea and I said, what kind of world would we leave for my grandchild if we went the energy poverty and restriction route? I do not want that for my grandchild. I want energy abundance and flourishing, human flourishing for my grandchild. I want the same kind of world that I grew up in. So with that sort of thing, I'm positive and really looking forward to the future in that. So people like my grandson, when he grows up, we talked about here, Ambassador Sands and Harold Hamm discussed that we can focus on things like coming up with a new talent pipeline. I want those training programs for when my grandson reaches the age where he's looking at, what am I going to do for my future? What am I going to do for my career? And like Harold Hamm said, there's nothing that the people in the room who work in fossil fuels need to be ashamed of. I would be proud to have my grandson go and study to be a petroleum engineer because he's producing the fuels that help improve people's lives, that help keep people alive through things, little things like making nitrogenous fertilizers. Only keeps about 4 billion people on the planet alive, right? Those are things that the energy industry can be proud of. So I'd echo Harold Hamm's thoughts on that. abundant, affordable, reliable energy is the key to human betterment. And again, there's nothing to be ashamed of when you do that. So looking forward, the AFPI energy team, Oliver, who I think is behind the curtain there, Ted Ellis, and also David, who's been introducing people all day, we plan to and promise to focus on these group of things. We're going to push for affordable American energy, reliable American energy, innovative American energy solutions. We're going to promise to supercharge domestic production, end unreasonable regulation whenever and wherever we can, and then revive the idea that wise use of our natural resources is a good thing. So, thank you from AFPI, everybody on the AFPI team, for joining us today for this Global Energy Summit, something I hope happens. I plan to help happen again very soon. Thank you for your support, and all of us in the room can look forward to a bright and flourishing future. And with that, we're done, and you're all excused.